In this video, we're going to talk about semantics. Now, we spent some time talking about the first subsystems of language. We've talked about phonology, sound, smallest units of sound in a language, and how sounds fit together to create words. We've talked about morphology, which is how those small building blocks of meaning are put together to form words. We've moved into syntax, thinking about phrases and sentences and word order, and how all of that creates meaning. And now we're moving into semantics and pragmatics. So really getting into those outer rings where we're thinking about the meaning of the phrases and sentences that we're using. All right, so semantics can be defined as the study of the meaning of words, phrases, and sentences. And so essentially that's understanding the nuances of meaning within individual words and also the relationships between words. So for example, some relationships that might be considered are synonyms, so words that mean about the same thing, like evil and wicked, although there might be some nuances of meaning, some shades of meaning that are different between synonyms, which shapes which word we would choose and why. Antonyms, like rich and poor, opposites. Homophones, which are words that are spelled differently, but they sound the same and they mean different things. So meat and meat, no and no, they sound the same, but they're spelled differently and they mean different things. Homonyms like table and bark, which are spelled the same and sound the same, but mean different things, right? And there are lots of words like that that have multiple meanings that can be really confusing for multilingual learners when they're first learning English to distinguish between which definition is being used in a given context. Another example of an area within semantics of study is modality or mood. The way in which something is being said, its purpose. So bring your homework tomorrow is a command versus students will bring their homework tomorrow, which is a statement. So kind of looking at how that mood is constructed. When I was teaching high schoolers in Santiago, Chile, one thing that my students really struggled with and that was difficult to teach was phrasal verbs. Phrasal verbs are verbs in English that have a verb and then a preposition added to the end of it. And that preposition changes the meaning of the verb or what that those two words together mean. And my students were often confused about how we got to these different meanings in English. And sometimes I was at a loss for how to explain exactly why the words meant what they meant, other than that they just had to memorize it and learn it because that was what they meant. So for example, there are many, many phrasal verbs in English. This is just a short list pulled from a video of an instructor teaching her students about them, like the verb look, which we know means to see something, right? When you add the preposition out to it, it becomes look out. So you're telling someone to watch, to be careful, or to look for someone, right? If you look out for someone, that's a little different than just looking. Work to work out. Totally changes the meaning there. Now we're talking about exercising. You wear something versus you wear it out, which means you've now started it's gotten worn, it's starting to fall apart. So there's meaning that is built into these phrasal verbs, and this is something that is definitely a challenge for students who are learning English as a new language as they try to figure out what these words mean once you add a preposition to them. All right, so let's talk a little bit then about semantics and second language acquisition. So some of the challenges then are understanding the meaning of words that sound the same or look the same but have different meanings, understanding the relationship between words. And so some ways you could address these challenges are by playing word games. So you could play games of synonyms and antonyms and have them brainstorm as many synonyms, for example, as they can around a given word. So expanding their vocabulary, explicitly teaching multiple meaning words and what those words can mean, explicitly teaching phrasal verbs and using them in context so that they can understand what those words mean. And also avoiding needless complexity. In one of the courses I have taught in the past, I would have students bring in examples of assessments that were, or learning activities, worksheets that were being used in the classroom, and we would analyze the language that was being used. And sometimes they would be needlessly complex, or they would use additional language that didn't need to be used, that could be confusing to students. There was one example that was similar, something like this, like the rabbit hopped 3 steps, then he hopped 2 more steps. How many steps did the rabbit jump? And we talked about the shift in language from hop to jump. There's a needless complexity to add to that in terms of language. It wouldn't actually help tell you anything else about the student's ability to solve the math problem there. Just adding one more language challenge to it. So that's a little bit about semantics, what it is, and some of the ways that it can make language learning challenging, and things to consider as you're thinking about supporting second language learners.